Welcome back, guys, to another video, and we are still continuing with our Node.js security crash course. And today we're going to be looking into session management, how we can actually handle a user's session, because we looked into how we can authenticate, right? So, but then with authentication comes handling the session, because we need to persist this user, because a user cannot log in each and every day, each and every time when they want to interact with our system. But then that is with an exception of what kind of application you are using, and we'll talk about that more. But then my name is Junior, and if you are keen to learning about backend development, consider subscribing, consider liking, sharing, do everything that needs to be done, because I'll be dropping bangers each and every time with regards to backend development, right? So now let's look into this session management thing, right? So now what we want to look into currently right now is what are we going to be using as a package to handle our sessions, because we're going to be using two packages. Now let me open my browser, and this browser, we're using Firefox. So let's just do that so that we can open this, and then let's see what packages we'll be using in order to handle our sessions. So the package that we're going to be using is express-session, and then I'll open another tab, and we're going to be using connect-mongo, right? So these are the two packages that we'll be using. These two packages work hand in hand together, right? So you guys can, I always recommend that reading the documentation about each and everything is fine, but then I will also be taking you guys through like each and everything that I'll be doing. So those two things work together. So express session is basically the one that will generate our cookie, and then connect mongo is the one that will be persisting our cookie within the database. But then this express session can take many stores like Redis, as you can see, the Cassandra cluster, some of the things I don't know, even Google Cloud, even DynamoDB, right? There's a lot, even PostgreSQL. There's a lot of things that this stores that this express session can make use of, but then we're going to be using MongoDB, right? So now let's come back to our application right here, and then I'll say npm install. I want to install express dash session and connect dash mongo. Hopefully everything is spelled appropriately, right? So now both this express session is a middleware that we'll be using, right? So now let's come to our server.js. This is where we're gonna be setting up this middleware, right? So and then I'll come in here, import this middleware or this module. So I'll say import express and then session, and this is from express dash session, and then I want to import mongo store from, and then this from connect dash mongo, right? So those are the two things that we need for now, and basically these are the two things that we'll be using for session management, right? So now this thing is still taking its sweet time to install, but then we can still continue, right? So now how then this thing works is we need to first initialize our store, right? So now we'll just do it just right underneath here. So let's just comment everything out, so that when I'll be sharing also the GitHub link today on this part 2 of the video of session management. So I'll say session handler, so just to have everything looking just fine, so that we all can understand this code. And then here it's basically our server endpoint, and then here we can say we have our Mongo connection. So this is just me making sure that everyone can understand, and then this is our base middle words. Right. So now this is basically what we have right now, and then let's see how far this download it is even finished, right? So now let's get started with this thing. So now what then we want to do is, first thing we need to initialize our store. So I'll come here, say store is equal to new Mongo store, and this Mongo store takes in that options, right? And this options is basically what we are defining for our Mongo store, such as the MongoDB URL. And here we're gonna pass in the Mongo URI because this is our Mongo connection, right? And then we'll give it a collection name. We'll say collection name. And then with regards to the collection name, I can just say session. And then next thing, we give it an auto remove. By default, this thing is set to native. And this native, what does it mean? That if the time to leave of the cookie has expired, then it'll remove when it has expired. So it'll automatically remove. Right. So I just like adding it, but by default, this auto remove is set by us. Not set by us, but then by the people that made this package. But then however, you can disable and you can even set an interval. But then I just like to set it on native so that we give the specified time to leave, and then Mongo store or this thing will know that okay, once this cookie has expired, it removes it from our database. That's that. And then the next thing that we'll do is now we need to set up our what we call our session middleware now, right? So with our session middleware, we use this express session package, and then we can just now come in here and then we say server.use. Remember, it's a middleware, so we first have to call in server.use, and then I call in that session. I believe I gave it express. It said it's express session. We say express session, and this express session is a function which will now take in options, right? So now within this options, I can give it the store, right? And the store we have defined there at the top, which is that top part, right? Which is that store that we defined. And then secondly, we can give it a secret. And then by default, the secret obviously shouldn't be here. We should be having a .env file. Same goes for this Mongo URL. So, but then we'll just here and write, and here we'll write it here, and then we'll write this is a super secret code. Right. And then the next thing that we need to add is what we call save and initialize. We'll say save initialize. We set that to true. And then we take in the resave because we don't want to resave any. We don't want to resave sessions that are not modified. So say resave to false, and then we need to give now the cookie options, right? So to define options for this cookie. So where is this cookie accessed, right? So we can say the cookie will be accessed at the home page, right? And then we can give it an HTTP only or false, and then we give it a secure or false, and then we come to same site. So due to this now being on the same site, I'll give it a lex, right? So this is for same side, or you can give either a boolean of true or false, right? So now I can just give that as a lex. So these are the options that we added for now, but then we'll still add more options to this thing so that we can see or modify certain options so that we can see how we can secure this session that we are generating, right? So by default, like this, we should have a session for a user, right? And we should be able to persist that session for a user. So now let's test this thing out. So let's create a route. So I'll just say server.get, right? And I give it out to the home page, and then we'll say request response, and then I'll say response.send, and then I'll send an h1, and within this h1 I'll say hello world. Let's just say session handling, right? So now let's try and run the server. Say npm run dev, right? So let's run dev and let's see what we get. And let's go to our Firefox, and then we can close one of those tabs, and I believe I'm running on port 5000. Hope so. So I run that on port 5000. And is my server up? Not yet. So let's wait for my server to kickstart, and then we can go to that part. So localhost that. So we see that okay, this thing is loaded. So now let's go to our storage, and let's see if this server did actually give us a session, right? So you can see that okay, we do have a session that is connected. Let's delete everything so that you can see delete all. We can see that the cookies are now empty. So if I refresh this, and then I have a cookie set, Right. So this is all good. We can see that, okay, there's a lot that we can do now with when a person logs in, we can now send this user to the homepage and then have their session. Right? That's perfect and all. So, but then now there are certain now problems that now start to arise. I mean, when we start this session. First of all, when a hacker tries to attack, first thing they do is what we call recon. And recon is basically trying to search as to what technologies this application is using, what tools, whatever that they're using, right? And you can see by default, Express Session gave me a value called connect.sid. So let's just do something. Let's say connect.sid um, session handler. Let's see something, right? I don't know if this will give you anything, but then you can see the moment I see there's a hacker trying to search, right? A hacker doesn't know anything about connect.sid, but then I just searched connect.sid, but then look at what's happening. They can now see that, okay, express session cookie. So it means it then tells the hacker that what tools am I actually using, that okay, the people at this company or this website is actually using express session. What then, where now can they go from here? They can now say, come here and say express dash session vulnerabilities. So now this now gives what we call a hacker a platform or a starting position. So now they can research more about this tool that we're using, and then they can get tons and tons of potential vulnerabilities which this package might have that we are using, right? And this is what we call recon, right? And info, it's reconnaissance, if I'm pronouncing it properly. So now the first thing, or the first mitigation, or first layer that we're adding to protecting this session ID is we have to make it in a way that a user, because say for example you see this for this text, right, as dollar whatever, there's no way you can tell that I'm using express session. And but then now how can we now hide this is now we can try and change this value to maybe SID, something like that. But then obviously you don't want to change it in browser manually, and it's impossible. How can I change for someone in America or someone in Canada while I'm in South Africa? So now what then can we do is I can now come in here to my express session, what we call middleware. And within this middleware, I can now enforce what I call a name. And then within this name, I can give it anything, underscore SID, I can give it ID, I can give it session. Anything. Right now, a session doesn't mean anything to a user, because at this point, what is this session? If we were to now delete everything, and then now we refresh, we delete everything, we refresh. Now we can see the name of this cookie is called session, right? So now can a hacker come and say session name cookie package? Impossible, impossible. There's no way. Why am I saying pancake here? Package. There's no way now a user can now find out like what tool we are using, because Laravel is now coming up, Django can even come out, a lot of tools can now come up, and they might not know which one we're using, right? But then that is the first layer that we're adding into this thing. So now secondly, we can now see that okay, what we have not yet finished everything, like we have not layered a lot of security measures towards this session cookie, right? So the next step that we can do is now you realize that, for example, we are running this cookie on an HTTP only and a secure false, right? So now say for example a user has been compromised with a session hijacking, but then we can mitigate that by whenever a user logs in, right, we now regenerate another session, a completely different session, right? So now how can we do that, right? Is now the good thing about this package called express session, it allows us to create functions that we can handle, right? So now what then can we do is we can now create a custom function called login, right? When a user log in, we can now make use of that function. Now what can I do now is I can come in here and say express session dot session dot prototype dot login. All right. So now within here, now I can now try and regenerate each and every what's this session whenever a user logs in. Make sure that I have a completely different new session, and then now this will take in the data. So the data would be the information within the session, the embedded session, and it will also take in a callback, right? Excuse me. So now with that said, here what did I do? So now I can now get the request body, and now say const request is equals to this dot request, right? And then now from there, what then can I do? And this was not even necessary. I could have used and come in here, say this dot request dot session dot regenerate. So now we call that, there's a function, and this function will take or give back an error if there is any. And then we say if error, what then do I do? I return a callback. So return a callback with that error message there, right? And then the next thing that I do is now, once there is no error, so I can now embed this and now say this dot request, this dot request dot session dot user is equals to the data that I got, right? And then now with that said, I can now just call back with nothing there, right? That will tell us that everything went successfully. So now with this function, I can make use of this function now. And with this, now we are regenerating each and every session that is being made. And then now what then can I do is I have to make use of the session within my login. Remember our login when we're logging in? I can now attach this, that when now a user logs in, we use that login function. So now I can come in here, my auth controller, and then let's scroll down. So you see where we have a successful login. What then can I do? I can now come in there and then say request dot session dot login, and then I pass in my user information. I'll say user data, which we have to create. I'll say user underscore data, and then that should be what we're passing in. So now this user underscore data, so I have to create this variable. I come in here just right at the top and say const user underscore data is equals to, and then I can just pass in the user ID for session. So I believe I have a user variable here that we found and validated that there's a proper user, and so on and so forth. So I can now attach within the session cookie just the user ID, and I could also attach maybe the email. Obviously don't want to attach the password, so I can also attach the email, say user.email, if it's something that you might need, right? So now I have attached that user data within that. So now every time this user session will be regenerated all the time. And then now with that said, we can now come in here. So this wouldn't really change much. You wouldn't see that much of a difference, because now I can come in here, but then behind the scenes, all this user data is now getting regenerated, right? So now the second thing that we want to look into is we need to make sure that our cookie is inaccessible to any scripts, right? Because now I can come in here as a malicious hacker. Say I can say document.cookie, right? You can see now I can see each and every cookie, right? And as a malicious hacker, I can now take this and now act as you. You understand? So now how then do we avoid such things, right? We now need to tell the server that when it sends this thing, it should tell the client via response that no JavaScript is allowed for this cookie. However, only HTTP can access this cookie provided by me, which is the server. So now this is where now I can come in here and say HTTP only and set that to true, right? So now if I come here, we delete this and I go back to my storage, and then we refresh that. So let's clean up this whole entire thing, and then we refresh, right? We can now see we have an HTTP only of true. So now if I come here to my console and say document dot cookie, nothing there. So the browser wouldn't no script would see these cookies, no nothing. However, how then would I be able to see this user as an authenticated user as a backend developer, right? Is that when a request is sent, all the credentials are sent as well. So now I can be able to access these credentials, which is what? All cookies that are set to be HTTP only. Right. So now that is another mitigation that we have embedded with regards to our session. Right. But then, however, whenever we're sending cookies, right, we need to enforce or we need to send this cookie via a secure channel, that is a TLS, right? We need to send that through that. But then now, when we're doing this via development, it is not impossible, but then it means that we'd have to configure our server to run on HTTPS, right? Which is another story for another day on how to configure that. So, but then what then am I saying to you guys is when we're sending this cookie, we need to send it via TLS, right? And then we need to make sure that this thing will only work in production, because now if I now come here to this secure, so this secure channel will make sure that I send this cookie via an HTTPS secure channel, right? So, but then now if I do this, say for example, HTTP of true, see what happens. So let's delete this cookie. Let's come delete this cookie, delete all. And then I believe my server should be running, right? Running just like a charm. So let's come here, we delete all cookies, and then we refresh. Do you see what happens? There's nothing being sent to this browser. Why? Because this browser or this server is running on HTTP. And now, due to us running through HTTP, we're running on an unsecure or insecure, right, channel. So now, and by us saying to our server that secure of true, that means that no cookie will be accessible to an unsecure channel. So if the channel that we are getting a request from is unsecure and by default HTTP is unsecure, then we will not handle that. We will not even send that. Hence, now we only want to have the secure of true whenever we have whenever we have our server in production. So now how then do we do that? We can now come in here and say process.env node underscore env and say if it's equal to production, right? We can set this to true. I'll set that to false. But then, however, even with this set, that means that you have to make sure that your server is running on HTTPS, or the client that is requesting for this cookie, right, is also running on an HTTPS channel. Because if not, then best believe this you'll also get the same problem, not the same problem, but then the same mitigation that you're trying, or not the same mitigation, obviously not that, but then you'll get the same response as which we are getting right now, because here we're trying to say that an unsecure channel, we don't send any cookies, right? So you'd still get the same response, right? So that's where now you only need to run it on production if and only if as well when both your client is running on HTTPS. So now if I refresh this, you see now I do get that cookie because I'm in I'm in development. I'm not in production, right? So now this is where now we have our cookie as HTTP only as secure false, but then in production will be secure of true, right? So now what is then the next thing or the last thing that I want to bring across with regards to sessions, right? Is there are certain key areas that you need or must have a user to re-authenticate. Why do you need that? Is because you need to check in depth the authenticity of the user. Say for example, I'm trying to reset my password. Don't just believe that okay, because this user is so and so so and so, you don't have to re-authenticate. Say you are trying to delete posts. For example, we're running a social media platform. Okay, not that, but then say you working on a bank application. That's actually a good one. So you're working on a bank application, right? And then when you're working on a bank application, and then you're trying to say for example transfer money, right? You cannot just trust and then just throw that money away, right? Or transact that amount. You need must authenticate again. So to make sure that this person that is running this process is actually an authenticated person. And this now brings me back to my last point with regards to session management, and that is time limit. Because and every application has its place in terms of how you are handling sessions, right? The way I'm handling sessions on a bank application might not be the same way that I'd handle session in what we call in an e-commerce application, right? Because that's when now it comes to time limit. Because I'm sure you've seen with regards to bank applications, the moment you log out, you're out. You have to re-authenticate. Most of them, I won't say every application, but then most of which I've used, the limit is only a day or some few hours. Right. So now, how then do we also enforce that kind of same energy with regards to our sessions, right? So we come here to our store, right? That's where now, remember this auto remove, right? It checks what TTL. And what is TTL? It takes time to leave. TTL is time to leave. I think it's leave, not leave. I think leave like this. I think it's leave like this if I'm not mistaken. But then this TTL is for time to leave. So now we need to tell it how long should our cookie leave, right? So now if we are saying that this cookie should last 1 day, all right, how then do we do that? I can now come in here, say 24 times 60 times 60. And this specifies that it should leave 1 day, right? TTL is equal to time to leave, right? So this specifies that this cookie should be persisted for 1 day only. And now you realize that you can now come in here, say for example you wanted more than 1 day, then you can make your life easy, multiply that by 2. Now that will be 2 days, multiplied by 10, that will be 10 days. Some simple math if I'm not mistaken, right? So now we just wanted to leave for 1 day. But then, however, you also need to specify within your express session, which will generate your cookie, um, the maximum age. So, but then you have to be careful that whatever you set here should be equivalent to what you will set here. So if I come here say max age, I have to make sure that what's here is equivalent to what's here. So now, how then would I specify this 1 day span? So, excuse me. So I come in here and say 24 times 60 times 60 times 1,000. So now this would also be 1 day span. Right. So now with that said, we have now specified how long this cookie or this session will last. So after a day, this will be gone. Right. So this is how basically we are handling our session, guys. So sessions, there's not really much to it, but then obviously we can get as advanced as we can get. And if you guys really want to go deep into these things heavy, but then this is just the crash course. This is where we're gonna end it off with regards to handling sessions, right? So if you like this video, it was nice, sweet, and short. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what you like to see with regards to anything back end related. Goodbye.